I've never done this before. I always save the power rankings until after the last games of the night are finished. I'm not doing that today. The power rankings don't really spoil all of the results, of course, and so I'm going to do the power rankings now because the game that's still in progress, let's just say it's already decided. And I'm wearing the right gear considering the way that tonight is going, because the last time I can remember the Canucks allowing 5 goals in the first, I got to think it's got to be back in the 80s. I haven't seen the numbers yet, but I'm thinking against this guy, 99, something like that, probably. Anyways, this week's power rankings brought to you by, I'm just kidding, I don't have a sponsor. Number 31, the Senators. They're not going to pull themselves out of 31st, I don't think, before the end of the year. I feel bad for Mark Crawford. He's brought into a situation where it sounds like they're expecting more results and they're expecting a greater effort from a team that's completely and totally overmatched on every level. So for the Senators, 31st, they haven't moved from that spot, and I want to say it's been 3 weeks now. Number 30, dropping 2 spots from last week, the Devils, who had a lead today and then seemed to remember they were the Devils and decided not to. The Devils and New Jersey fans will point this out, a lot of injuries. But before they had all those injuries, still a brutal season they've been putting together. So the injuries are just the latest issue for a team that has a lot of issues. So New Jersey, their hope is lying with the draft lottery right now. Number 29, moving up 1 spot from last week. Detroit puts up a good fight against Tampa. They had themselves a win this week of sorts. So Detroit moves up to 29th. These are 3 teams that are going to be battling it out for that last place in that number 1 draft pick, except Ottawa doesn't own their draft pick, so it's Colorado that's going to be fighting for that. But it is interesting that the bottom 3 teams are all in the Eastern Conference. And Atlantic. So while we talk about how the 3 of the best teams in the league are from the Atlantic, 2 of the worst are also in the Atlantic. So the separation between top and bottom is even more dramatic, I think, this year than we expected. Number 28, dropping 1 spot from last week, the Kings. Plucky, feisty, whatever you want to say about them. The Kings. Let me just block out the light there. You guys can see this. There you go. There you go, Kings. Kings in 28th spot. I could probably turn this so that Kings show up. There you go. Just so the Kings show up. You can see it. The LA Kings playing out the string. Again, it felt like they were maybe on their way to a result, and then they remembered the season they were having, and that all fell apart. Number 27, and people are going to be like, why aren't these guys showing up yet? Well, because they're here. They dropped 1 spot from last week, and Vancouver, it's abysmal. The good news is, if you're a Canuck fan, it looks like they're going to be picking up Lockwood on a contract now that his college season is over, and Hughes, and they're going to burn a year on their contracts. I was just listening to Brian Burke talk about it. This is standard. So when people say, well, you can't burn a year on the contract, then they don't sign. And if an NCAA player doesn't sign, you don't get a chance to keep him. He can go as an unrestricted free agent. The NCAA players have all the power in this situation. So rather than losing somebody as a free agent, you just sign him. Yes, it means that you'll have to protect him when Seattle comes into the league. That's the least of your worries if you're the Canucks in 2021, I would think. But it is part of the reason why Edler hasn't been signed to an extension yet. So watch for that. That's about all the good news you're going to see for the Canucks right now. Number 26, dropping 3 spots from last week, the New York Rangers. As expected, the post-trade deadline Rangers. It's been a bit of a drop now. Now they win today, but still the New York Rangers dealing with a situation where they're just playing out the string. And again, I'm not. It is tough to differentiate between some of these teams because they're all playing out the string. The Rangers ahead of the Devils, the Red Wings, the Kings, and the Canucks because they're still winning more games than these teams are. Number 25, moving up 4 spots from last week. It's got to be going to their heads, the Anaheim Ducks. With the Canucks losing big and the Ducks winning a couple this week, come on. You got to pass these guys. Make it so that when the Canucks lose the draft lottery, they don't drop to 8th or 9th or something. The Ducks have looked very good. And I think the encouraging thing for the Ducks, the really encouraging part for the Ducks, is the kids. The kids are looking pretty solid. And that's really the key thing, is how well the young players play for them right now. They're looking forward to next year. They also are in a position to get an excellent draft pick this year. This year's draft is not considered to have as many draft or NHL ready players as other drafts, but the last time we heard that, it was the draft with that Pettersson kid in it, and he wasn't too bad. Number 24, staying in the same spot as last week, is Buffalo. You know what really hit me this week is that a lot of teams are staying in the same spot as they did last week. This is only the second one, but you're going to find as I go up through this power rankings, there's a lot of teams that haven't moved. Buffalo, not showing any fight today against Colorado until it was too late, and they're done, and they know they're done. At least it looks like they know they're done. And it's another frustrating year for Eichel. I'll be interested to see what he has to say at the end of this season, if there's any exit interviews given with the press, and see how Buffalo feels about themselves moving forward. They've had a much better year than last year. The problem is they peaked early, so it feels just as miserable as last year because they've fallen so far so fast. Number 23, rising 2 spots, the Oilers. And they don't rise more because they came up flat against the Leafs. I know. We'll get into that in the review. I haven't done the review yet, but the end result is still the same. The Edmonton Oilers find themselves 7 points out of the playoffs. There's too many teams to jump over. They're not going to make the playoffs. This has been a very frustrating year for the Oilers. The good news is they're showing signs of turning the corner. The bad news is, over the last 10 plus years, I can't count how many times I've heard, well, the Oilers finished strong, so next year's going to be better. It happened a lot. It happened before Connor got there, and it looks like it's happening again now, where people can argue, hey, the Oilers look pretty good after the trade deadline, just leave it as it is and things will get better. And in every other case, it just hasn't happened with the Oilers. Number 22, same spot as last week. Like I said, there's a lot of status quo here. Florida, they're losing. They're not losing by a lot. Whether it's a great team or it's a bad team, whoever they're playing, they're finding ways to lose. But they're losing a lot in overtime. They're competitive. Their offense is fantastic, like Barkov and Huberdeau and their star players like Hoffman. Great attack. And it's the rest of the team that just... The defense, the blue line, honestly, they need to do something. I would say adding 2 top 4 blue liners is what they got to do, and those guys aren't exactly up for cheap. Number 21, dropping 2 spots from last week. Colorado. They won today. They did well today. But for me, Colorado is still... I don't see them making the playoffs. I just don't. The Landeskog injury hurts that, but notice that without Landeskog, they come up today with a big win. Losing one player, it seems big when it's a big name, but if a team has depth, you can absorb that loss. It's when they lose 4 or 5 roster players that seems to be a bigger effect on a team, because now you're really drawing on depth from the minors. That seems to be more of an effector on a team than, say, losing your biggest star, or in this case, Landeskog, their biggest goal scorer. But still, rough week for Colorado overall, and they drop a couple of spots. Now, number 20 also dropping a couple of spots. They won today, though, Chicago. Chicago also not in a position to likely make the playoffs. They currently sit, I believe, 7 points out. I can't see them getting in, but the fight is there. Crawford has a good game today. So Chicago still avoiding being in this area towards the end of the year, but I still have them in 20th. Number 19, rising 2 spots from last week, Dallas. And they would have been in the second row if they'd been able to beat Chicago today. And yes, I debated about having them below Chicago because Chicago beat them, but this was a 4-game winning streak that was just broken tonight, so they've won 4 out of 5. I only had them rise 2 spots. I think that's a cautious rise in the rankings for them. And for Dallas, I'm still relatively confident they're going to make the playoffs. They should. They really, really should. But tonight it just felt a little different, and we'll see whether or not they can bounce back from that, like Carolina did. Number 18, dropping 6 spots from last week, Columbus. Now Columbus gets a big win tonight to avoid dropping into this area, but what a huge drop by Columbus. This was a rough week. I know they beat Pittsburgh. I know they pulled themselves back into a playoff spot right now. But this was not a fantastic week. They're not supposed to be fighting it out for that second wild card with a chance that they're not going to make the playoffs. And that's become the narrative around a lot of NHL circles right now. Could Columbus actually miss the playoffs after being buyers at the deadline? The answer is yeah. Apparently they can. So for Columbus, tonight's win, they have to continue that run. Number 17, up 3 spots from last week. I know. Arizona fans aren't going to be happy. They're going to say I'm not moving them up fast enough through the rankings. I heard that last week as well. I've been hearing it for a while. But they won 6 out of 7 on their homestand, so that's important. Now they go back out on the road. They currently sit 1 point outside of a playoff spot. They have a game in hand on the team that they're behind, which is Minnesota. But Arizona is moving up. So, again, with the way that I do the power rankings now, it's not this dramatic rise, dramatic fall for the most part. It's a gradual rise, gradual fall. It's more of a, okay, you won that game. I'm not going to make that huge move yet like I used to. Power rankings the way they were. Next year, I may end up doing them 2 ways. Doing them this way and the other way too. To go with the frenetic power rankings and the subjective, the more thoughtful power rankings, for lack of a better way of putting it. And I would do them on 2 different days during the week, right? That would confuse people. People would be like, wait, but you had them at 16. Now they're on 25 on this one. You said they went down 2 spots, but they weren't. Yeah, that could be very confusing. Number 16, staying in the same spot as last week. Flyers fans won't like it. I know that. They did well this week. But again, for the Flyers, there's a math problem with making the playoffs. And just the general results for them, while they've been pretty good, and that's probably understating it. And I do have them ahead of half the league. I still don't see them being able to pull their way into a playoff spot. But they are currently 5 points back, so we'll see. Number 15, tough team to figure out. Minnesota. Same spot as last week. So they go in and they beat Tampa, right? And then they lay an absolute egg, just a stinker, against Florida. So they stay in the same spot. I genuinely don't know. They've won a lot of games. They were 6-0-2 going into that Florida game in their last 8. So they're 6-1-2 in their last 9. I still like their chances of making the playoffs, but that game in Florida, a lot of question marks for me with that one. That one was strange. Number 14, dropping 3 spots from last week. Montreal. There will be some who say Montreal should drop further than that. I would answer with what Montreal fans answer with, which is, if Carey Price starts against San Jose, does that get them a point in that game? So as a result of that, it might be a little bit generous, but I only dropped them 3 spots this week. If Montreal has another week this coming week like last week, they will find themselves down where Columbus is, or perhaps down where Dallas is, but for right now, it's a drop of 3 spots. Number 13, moving up 1 spot from where they were last week, so because of the Montreal fall, is Pittsburgh. The Penguins, despite the loss against Columbus, I still think they have an excellent chance to make the playoffs. They have to be really careful, though, because if they end up being a wild card, it's going to be quite the matchup, especially if they played Washington. Can you imagine Washington and Pittsburgh in the first round? They haven't met each other in about a year. And then they met each other the year before that, and the year before that. Seemingly every year, it's Pittsburgh and Washington. Pretty standard. Number 12, moving up 1 spot from last week, is Nashville. So the Predators come out tonight, and it was not their best game, but the Preds in general still hanging tough and close when it comes to that number one spot in the division. They have fewer games left than other teams. So that being said, they could very well find themselves in about 15th if teams behind them play really well and Nashville's idle. But that being said, I still like Nashville's chances going into the playoffs of at least winning a round. I think with Pecorine, I think with the attack they can throw together, if they can keep it all healthy, I really think Nashville can at least win a round this year. Number 11. There's a fan base out there saying, wait, we're not on the board yet. That's right. Vegas moves up 6 spots from last week. They've won. Tonight it'll be 6 in a row. I'm not jinxing them by saying it. They're up 5-1 after one. So it'll be 6 in a row for Vegas. Amazing overall numbers for the Vegas Golden Knights. Mark Stone now is starting to hit the board. He's starting to score. We'll get into that with the review later. This is quite the story. It is quite the story going on with Vegas. And I'm not sure where this story ends, to be honest. It felt like going into the trade deadline, well, Vegas is going to be out in the first round. They don't look like that anymore. And now they would play Calgary in the first round. I think they match up well with Calgary, and we'll find out again tomorrow night. Because, yes, the rematch is tomorrow night. Number 10, dropping 5 spots from last week. I have some dramatic concerns about the Islanders. I do. They've fallen out of first in the division. They've started losing some games. Their goaltending has started to show some cracks. And their scoring, which has not been great all year, it's been good enough. Suddenly there's more of a spotlight on the goaltending, on the scoring, because the goaltending has kind of become middle of the road. The Islanders can't afford this. And right now they've got some teams behind them in Pittsburgh, even in Columbus, Carolina, who are looking to make some hay. While the Islanders were not on my board about making or not making the playoffs, and I think it would be highly, highly suspicious of me to include them in those ranks, I do have some concern about them dropping down, potentially being third in the division or a wild card, and that could leave them in a position where they're out in the first round. That being said, Barry Trotz is the coach. You just never know, right? Number 9, staying in the same spot as last week, St. Louis. Up and down week for St. Louis. They've definitely, in my eyes, the huge winning streak, the amount of excitement that they'd created has fallen off. That being said, they came out with a solid result in San Jose. They didn't get the win this afternoon, but it was a solid result and showed that Jake Allen is starting to play like a starting goaltender. So there's a lot of things to like with what's going on with St. Louis right now. And to think that maybe it's not over, that it's not done yet, things are still on their way to something better for the St. Louis Blues. That being said, first round matchup between them and Nashville, that'd be awesome. Number 8, staying in the same spot. No, dropping 1 spot from last week. Sorry. Yeah, Carolina drops 1 spot from last week. A huge loss last night hurt them. A win tonight helped them stay in this spot, or else I might have dropped them to 9th. But Carolina, yep, for my money, playing very solid hockey. They've been in the top row now for 3 or 4 weeks. They're playing well, and this is. It seems like the rest of the hockey world was so focused on the surge, they didn't seem to be focused on the fact that they only do the surge when they win. So if people are getting really mad at the surge, it must mean they're winning a lot. I also had the idea tonight of creating my own, if I had enough miniatures or something where when they went on the road, I could make up my own surge or something on the board, but I couldn't figure out a logistical way to do it. But it's an idea that I have because I had this shipped to me, so I now have the bunch of jerk shirts. So that's proof, that wasn't all that cheap either. I got that a couple weeks ago. It's not a cheap item either. But I thought this is kind of a fun thing, and if this continues into the playoffs, it'd be nice to have a shirt for that, and it's just good fun. So the bunch of jerks. I now have the shirt to show that I support the whole idea of having fun after you win, after the other team leaves the ice. Not during the game. It's not like they're doing the chicken dance in between the second and third period because they're up by a goal. That'd be a really lame Surge. I hope they don't do that. Don't do that for the Surge. Number 7, moving up 3 spots from last week. Yep, Winnipeg is back in the top row. Had a very good week. I understand they got beaten by Tampa. That's not something... You know what's funny? I cannot think of the last time that a team got beaten by Tampa and I actually dropped the team that lost on this board. It's not a thing. You lose to Tampa, you lose to Tampa. You beat Tampa, you have a better chance of moving up. But if you lose to Florida the next night, you'll probably confuse me and I leave you where you're at, Minnesota. But yeah, so for me, Winnipeg had a pretty darn good week. That win over Carolina was very entertaining and very, very convincing over a Carolina team that has been excellent. And then Don Cherry talked about that tonight. He talked about O'Mackle, and he was left to hung out to dry to him for 8 goals because they played tonight and they knew Mrazek was playing tonight. I don't understand some of these commentators that they'll fly off the handle about something a team does, but research why the team does it. There are times where there's a reason that a goaltender's left in for a bunch of goals against, where he's probably told in between periods, sorry, you're in. No matter how many goals go in, you're the guy because we play tomorrow night and we're resting him for tomorrow. Number 6, dropping 3 spots from last week. Flames. There's a lot of reason for concern if you're a Flames fan. Under the old system that I used to do this with, the Flames would probably have dropped down into about 11th. It's not as reactionary the way that I do the power rankings now, but I could not have Calgary higher than this. The goaltending isn't the issue over the last couple of losses, which is the funny part. It's been scoring. Whatever Goudreau and the boys need to get scoring, figure it out fast. The playoffs are coming. If they're in against Vegas, the way Vegas is playing right now, the way Calgary looks right now, Vegas takes Calgary out. I'm just throwing that out there. Vegas is playing excellent hockey, and Calgary has been kind of treading their wheel or spinning their wheels a bit lately. Can't be doing that. Number 5, moving up 1 spot from last week. Toronto. So, recipient of Calgary's poor misfortunes. Toronto's back in the top 5 this week. Just moving up that 1 spot. They had a solid week. Yeah, they blew a 2-goal lead in Vancouver. Yeah, Dan Murphy jinxed them. I don't believe in jinxes personally. They're not a thing. Dan Murphy doesn't have that kind of power. Look, Dan Murphy's an interviewer for the Canucks. If he thought he had some kind of a weird mojo power, he would have used it ages ago. Ages ago. The Canucks would have a much better record. And, yeah, so he doesn't have any kind of magic powers. Number 4, moving up 4 spots from last week. Washington Capitals. The Capitals are up to 4th. And the interesting thing for me with Washington is this. It's not that I'm moving them ahead at an increased rate. It's not like I'm watching them play these games like, oh, I've got to move them up. It's that the teams ahead of them drop some games, and Washington really hasn't. Washington has been solid and steady, and they've looked really quite good over the last few weeks. Thus, the reason that they're all the way up to 4th. And we're not really talking about it a lot. We talk about OV. We talk about Backstrom. We talk about Carlson and his Norris hopes. We don't really talk about the fact that they're playing pretty well. They're first in their division. And at that time of year again, and it looks like the Capitals are set to clinch home ice through the first 2 rounds. And you can't overstate how important that is for the Capitals as defending Stanley Cup champions. Number 3. This is kind of where things... San Jose moves up 1 spot to 3rd. Now, I know there's San Jose fans who are going to be concerned because Erik Karlsson's on the shelf. They were winning a lot of games early in the year when Karlsson wasn't playing very well. Karlsson hasn't been the reason that they're one of the best teams in the league. He's helped. But there's a solid enough blue line with San Jose that without Karlsson, they can still win the division. And as long as he's healthy for the playoffs, I don't see any reason to be overly worried. They've passed Calgary by virtue of their victory today, and I don't see any reason why they won't be able to continue that. Number 2, that would be Boston. And number 1's Tampa. And the thing is, with points now in 19 straight games, which is a brand new franchise record, you can put an asterisk in there because there weren't overtime and shootout games back in the day when the 18-game record was set. Boston's been fantastic, and I'll get into that when I do the review after this Canucks game. But it's been great. And yet Tampa is still the best team in the league. I do not have any reason to put Boston ahead of Tampa, nor would I put Boston ahead of Tampa unless Tampa were to lose, say, 2 or 3 in a row. They'd have to be big losses, and Boston would have to keep rolling. There's no reason not to have Tampa in first place. There just isn't. That being said, let's change things around. Okay, so as you can see, the Montreal Canadiens, by virtue of their 26 Stanley Cups, are first on this week's power rankings. The Maple Leafs, by virtue of their 13, are second. The Oilers, due to Wayne Gretzky, are on third. Steve Yzerman and Gordie Howe's Red Wings in fourth. The Mario Lemieux, Sidney Crosby Penguins in fifth. The run of the Hawks in the 2010s puts them in sixth for me. The New York Rangers, the story of 1994, which wasn't great for me on a personal level with, the Canucks being the finals and all, still pretty solid, makes them seventh. The Islanders, the only American-based team to have 4 straight Stanley Cups. In eighth, the Philadelphia Flyers, Broad Street Bullies in ninth. The Boston Bruins, and I'm leaning towards the Bobby Orr Boston Bruins of the early 70s with this. The Marty Brodeur-led New Jersey Devils in 11th. Jonathan Quick-led Kings in 12th. If Ovechkin can win a second Stanley Cup this year, then the Capitals move up a little bit on this power rankings. Of course, 2006 was the year for Carolina, 2007 for the Ducks, 1999 for the 1989. What am I saying? 1989 for the Calgary Flames. Arizona's in here for no good reason. Then Tampa, 2004, and Dallas. There's your 1999. And Colorado, I have them down here because I really didn't like Patrick Roy. So I'm going to rate them below the Phoenix Coyotes, who never, as the Jets or as the Coyotes, have ever been to a Stanley Cup final. So there's your Stanley Cup power rankings. Of course, Ottawa in last place due to Danny Heatley. St. Louis second to last because they don't win. And the rest of these teams, it's just a matter of you got to break into the vault of Stanley Cups. And the top 20 teams have done that, minus the Arizona Coyotes. But the Kachina is worth a Stanley Cup. There you go. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't be afraid to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.